Sorry for the delay. Shalom to everyone here and abroad. We've gone through all of the great figures of the Torah that correspond to the different sfirot. We have one left, which is today. It's Aharon, Kohen Gadol, the high priest. And the reason that we are devoting it this month of Av is because this is his special month. On the first day of Av, Rosh Chodesh, the new moon of Av is his Yortzeit. It's the only Yortzeit which is explicit in the Torah. The Torah says that on the first day of the fifth month, he ascended to heaven. And now we're also, maybe the delay was in order to become a little bit closer to Chamisha Asar B'Av, the 15th of Av, which is one of the greatest and happiest days of the year. It's the day of Shidduchim, of matches. So it's the day of love between souls. And that soul who represents the love between souls of Israel is Aharon. So his Yortzeit is the new moon of this month. But his epitome of his service and of his contribution to the people of Israel, to all mankind, which is to nurture love between souls. We're about to enter that day, which is the high moon. Because the first day is the new moon, which is, we don't see the moon, and then it reaches its height, its epitome, on the 15th day of the month. So as we've done in the previous sessions, we'll go through the different sfirot and try to identify that attribute of Aharon that corresponds to that particular sfirah. And we'll devote ourselves mostly to the higher sfirot, which is Keter, the super rational crown of the soul, and the wisdom and the understanding and the knowledge of the soul. Because as we've said in the previous classes, the 7 lower attributes we've already spoken about in a different context, not in this class. But the material is available to anyone that's interested. Since we began with the idea that Aharon is the epitome of love between souls, so let's talk about the different levels of love that are described in Kabbalah and Chassidut. In general, there are 3 different levels of love. There is simple love, which is natural love. It's the love of the heart. It's the love that corresponds to the sphere of chesed, of loving kindness. A person has love in his heart, so he wants to do good to everyone that he can do good. That's the love which is the love of Abraham, who is the man of kindness, chesed Abraham. It's also referred to in Kabbalah and Chassidut as ahavat olam, the love that comes from the meditation of God's presence in the world, in our lives, that we see divine providence and we see God bestowing goodness upon us. And we want to emulate God, so we also want to show goodness to everyone that we can. So it's both love of God, the natural love of God in the heart, and love of people. That's the basic level of love, which once more corresponds to chesed, the tefillah of loving kindness, which is the first of the 7 attributes of the heart. But then there is called ahava rabbah, great, infinite love, love that knows no bounds. That love corresponds to ima, to the mother figure, which is understanding, is already above the attributes of the heart, which correspond to the days of creation. It's something which is pre-creation, above creation. That's why it's infinite. It's ahava rabbah. That is the love which is usually identified with Aharon. I mean, there's something about the priest, the high priest, Aaron the high priest, that his love is even higher than the love of Abraham, of the first Jew. But as we'll see in the continuation, it's based, the foundation of his love is Abraham. But since he is after the giving of the Torah, as explained in Chassidut, so he is able to reach even a higher revealed level of love than that which Abraham experienced throughout his life. But then there's even a higher, a third level of love. And the third level of love is in the super-rational crown. That's what we're beginning to discuss now. And that's called the love of delights. That love is a quotation from the Song of Songs, which is the holiest book and song of the Bible. And there it says, how beautiful and how pleasant is the love of delights. That love which is super-rational pleasure, just pure delight and pleasure, is coming from a place which in Kabbalah is called the delights of God Himself in Himself. But in the Song of Songs is obviously coming to describe the highest level of love between the groom and the bride of the Song of Songs. So that love of delights is in the crown. So these are the 3 basic levels of love as explained in Kabbalah and Chassidut. So we reach now the crown, the highest level of love, which is ahava b'ta'anugim, love of delight. Now let's meditate a little bit on the name Aharon. We'll write it in Hebrew on the board so we can all look at the 4 letters of the name. It's Aleph, Hey, Reish, Nun. We'll translate those letters into numbers. Aleph is 1, Hey is 5, Reish is 200, and Nun is 50, meaning that altogether his name is also a very, very perfect number comes out, which is 256. It's 16 squared, which itself is 4 to the 4th, which itself is 2 to the 8th. Since it's a power of 2, it comes out in all digital phenomena. 256. But now let's calculate, or let's contemplate the 4 letters of the name in what's called small numbering. Small numbering means that you take out the zeros. Meaning that the 200 is reduced to 2, and 50 is reduced to 5. And then we translate those numbers back into letters. So the first letter is 1, that's already reduced. The second letter is 5, which is also already reduced. The third letter then becomes Bet, 2. And then the fourth letter becomes Hey. So what does that spell? It spells Aleph, Hey, Bet, Hey, which is the word Ahava. Meaning once more that the kernel essence of Aharon, of Aaron, is love. Pure love, the epitome of love. Now there's another phenomenon which is a little bit requires a bit more of calculation. We'll take the two words, Ahava, love, and the name Aharon. Each one has 4 letters to it. So there's a very simple mathematical process which is called, it's called dot product, which means that you line the letters 1 to 1, correspondence, and you multiply them. So if we'll write Ahava on the top, the 4 letters Ahava, and then Aharon beneath the 4 letters of Ahava, so then we can see how this process works. It's very simple. You take the Aleph of Ahava and multiply it by the Aleph of Aharon equals 1. 1 times 1 equals 1. Then the Hey of Ahava corresponds to the Hey of Aharon. 5 times 5 equals 25. So we already have the 2 first dot products give us 26. Those are the common letters between Aharon and Ahava and love. But now we'll continue with the normative gematria, numerical equivalence. The 3rd letter of Ahava is Bet, and the 3rd letter of Aharon is Resh. 2 times 200 is 400. So the 3rd dot product is 400. But then the final letter of Ahava is Hey, 5. And the final letter of Aharon is Nun, 50. 5 times 50 is 250. So what do those 2 last dot products equal? 400 and 250 is 650. But 650 is 25 times 26. We already had 126 before. So the entire process, this entire dot product, comes out to be 26 times 26. Meaning the average value of each one of these 4 multiplications is 13 times 13, which is Ahava times Ahava, love squared, love perfected. So this is a much, both are a very beautiful and amazing phenomenon, but this is especially beautiful and amazing, that Aharon and Ahava comes out to be God's name, which is 2 times Ahava. God's name itself, 26, is 2 times 13, which is Ahava. And the average value is 13 squared. So there couldn't be anything more beautiful to demonstrate that Aharon is the epitome, the essence of love. And that ultimate level of love is in the crown, is the love of delights, the totally super-rational love of Aharon. Right, so this is the first phenomenon of Aharon that identifies him with the crown. But there are other things about Aharon that have to do with the crown. One very important thing that we haven't maybe seen in the previous analysis of the different archetypal souls of Israel, that sometimes you learn about the source of a soul from some flaw in the soul. That if the soul in his lifetime blemished something that maybe for somebody else it wouldn't even be considered a blemish or a flaw, but if in Kabbalah, let's say, like the Arizal, the greatest of the Kabbalists, says that he has to come back in a reincarnation in order to rectify some flaw that he was responsible for in a previous lifetime. So that flaw and its Gilgul, its reincarnation and its rectification, all indicates or points at where his soul is from. Because he has to rectify that soul origin, that the source of the soul. So Aharon, how great he is, the older brother of Moshe Rabbeinu. And once more, the epitome of love. There's no greater soul of love than Aharon. We read the Torah and we immediately see that something went wrong with Aharon. What went wrong? He, by mistake, as we'll see, as the Arizal explains, because of mistaken thought, he participated in the sin of the golden calf, as he allowed the people to sin in the sin of the golden calf. That's why the Torah says that even in one place, in one verse, it says that the calf was Asher Asa Aharon, was made by Aharon, because he allowed it to happen. There's a story that is not explicit in 100% explicit in the Torah, but it reads, if you read it correctly, the wording of the Torah. Aharon and Moshe Rabbeinu, the two brothers, had a nephew. His name was Hur, the son of Miriam, the son of the older sister of the two brothers. We know that there were three siblings. First Miriam, and then Aharon, and then Moshe Rabbeinu was the third, the last. And the first sibling, Miriam, had a son whose name was Hur, and he was also a very important figure in the war of Amalek. When Moshe Rabbeinu went up on the mountain, raised his hands in order to draw down the spirit of victory for the Jewish people. So it says that the two great tzaddikim held up his hands. Aharon, his brother, held up his right hand, and Hur, his nephew, Miriam's son, held up his left hand. And he continued to pray until Israel was victorious over Amalek, the archenemy of the Jewish people. So we already have met Hur, but later in the Torah we don't see Hur appear in any story, in any context whatsoever. What happened to Hur? So in the sin of the golden calf, it says that Aharon saw, and if the word is read correctly, according to Chazal, he saw someone that was slaughtered in his face, in his presence. Who was that? That was Hur. Hur was a leader of the people. Moshe Rabbeinu was not here, he was up on the mountain. So there are two people that were responsible now for leading the people, for the Jewish people, which was Aaron the high priest and his nephew, Hur. So Hur took full responsibility for what the people were doing, about to make a golden calf, an idol. And he chastised and rebuked the people strongly. But the people were so into the ecstasy, the foreign negative ecstasy of this golden calf, that they killed him. So Hur was killed. Aharon saw that his nephew, which was actually now his partner, was killed. So he realized that if I'm going to also rebuke and chastise the people not to make this golden calf, they'll kill me also. So now we need up until now, the sages in the Talmud teach us. But now we need the Kabbalah, the Arizal, to take us one step further. Abraham had two brothers. One was Haran, and the other was Nachor. The three last letters of Nachor are Chur, which comes to teach us that actually Chur was a reincarnation of Abraham's brother Nachor. But Haran, the other brother of Abraham, are the three last letters of Aharon. So Aharon and Haran definitely sound the same and are the same. It's just that Aharon got an aleph, an additional aleph from someplace. And the Rizal says that aleph that he got was from Adam HaRishon, because his ultimate origin in the whole line, the lineage of his reincarnations like a lineage, a spiritual lineage. So it all begins with Adam. And he took the aleph of Adam, the first letter of Adam, of the first man, and added that to the three letters of the name Haran, which is Abraham's brother, and he became Aharon. What happened to Haran? What do we know about Haran? It's also not 100% explicit in the Torah, but it also can be read into the words of the Torah. When Abraham was thrown into the furnace by the king Nimrod because he broke the idols of his father's store. His father Terach had an idol store. And Abraham, when he recognized and came to know God as the one God, so his mission in life was to teach the world monotheism and to destroy idolatry. So as a young man, his first act, which once was not actually explicitly stated in the written Torah, it's described at length in the oral Torah, but it has an origin in the written Torah, if you read it correctly, is to break the father's idols. And then the father himself turned him over to the police. Not just he turned him over to the police, he turned him over to the king Nimrod, and the punishment was to throw Abraham, our first Jew, our first father, into the furnace. But he miraculously came out of the furnace without being burnt to death. Haran, his younger brother, was sitting on the side watching the whole story. And he said to himself in his mind, the sages teach us, that if Aharon comes out, if Abraham comes out miraculously from the furnace, then I'm going to believe in his God. And I'm going to even say to everyone that I belong to Abraham and to his belief. But if he is burnt, not. When Abraham came out miraculously from the furnace, so the king came over and asked Haran, who are you with? Are you with me or are you with Abraham? So since he saw that Abraham came out alive from the furnace, Haran also thought to himself that even if he'll throw me into the furnace, I'll also come out alive, just like my brother Abraham came out alive. But because he had that thought, that he relied or believed that he'll come out alive, and that he wasn't actually willing and ready to give up his life for his faith. So he was thrown. He did throw him into the furnace after he declared and proclaimed that he's one of Abraham's men, and he was burnt to death in the furnace. And what's more, his sin was that he did not actually have true Mesirut Nefesh, because he thought that he'll be saved just like Abraham was saved. When a person is ready to give up his life for God, so he has to think that God is not going to do a miracle for me. Because if he thinks that God is going to do a miracle, he's not actually giving up his life. And if he thinks that God will not do a miracle, then God will do a miracle. That's a very basic teaching. But the opposite we see from Aharon, that he thought that God would do a miracle, and because of that, God didn't do a miracle. But you can't rely on me, you should not rely on miracles, especially in a case of Mesirut Nefesh, of readiness to give up one's life for Hashem. All right, so Aharon is now this figure that he was on the verge, let's call it, he was on the verge of a complete conversion. We've been talking a lot about conversion. We'll talk more about it today. He was about to completely become a Jew. A Jew means one of Abraham's people. He's his brother. But he didn't make it 100%. So because of that, the Arizal teaches us that Aharon, it was his Gilgul, his reincarnation, should have given up his life. Even though he just now saw that Hur gave up his life, his nephew gave up his life, but he also should have given up his life to prevent the Golden Calves. And would he have given up his life, he would have totally rectified Aharon, which would mean also a tremendous percentage of mankind, which relates to that soul root of Aharon, would become rectified and would become Jewish. But he made a mistake. His mistake was that Aharon was a very great sage, with also Ruach HaKodesh, and he knew that even though Hur, his nephew, was essentially a reincarnation not of Haran, but of Nahor, the other brother, but he also had in himself, Hur, a spark of Haran. So since he possessed a spark of Haran, and he actually gave up his life, so Aaron thought this is all the Arizal has to reveal to us. We will never know this by ourselves. Aaron thought that that's sufficient to rectify Haran. The fact that Hur, who has a spark of Haran, gave up his life, in actuality, that's enough in order to rectify the fact that Haran had this thought that God is going to do a miracle for me, and I'm not going to die. But that was a mistake. Because even though he was correct that he did possess a spark of Haran, but that wasn't enough to rectify the whole soul of Haran. And since Aaron, is the essential reincarnation of Haran, the rectification would have come about had he given up his life completely. This is all a teaching of the Arizal. It's much more a part of the line of the reincarnations of the soul of Aharon, which is one of the great all-inclusive souls of all of the Jewish people and all of mankind. So actually we'll just now trace the soul from Adam. It begins with Adam, and then it goes to Hevel. All the three brothers, Abraham and Haran and Nahor, all come from Hevel, from Abel, which means they come from the right side of Adam. All three. That's why they have an affinity to one another. And that's actually part of the reason that Aaron made this mistake, that he thought that Hur was enough to rectify Haran. They all come through Hevel, but then from Hevel it goes to Haran, and from Haran, the brother of Abraham, it then goes to Aharon. Haran, as we can see, whoever knows a little Hebrew, is the same letters of Herayon, of pregnancy. And also, obviously, then Aharon also has to do with pregnancy. That has to do with his mother level. In a certain sense, he's pregnant with all of the Jewish souls. But after Aharon, then still he has to be rectified. So the whole line of reincarnations that I don't know if we'll be able to go through all of them now. In the end, he's rectified. Everyone, Aharon is rectified. They're all rectified. That's with the coming of Mashiach. What other property? So once more, what we're saying now is that the fact that he should have given up his life to do whatever he could possibly do to prevent the sin of the golden calf for the Jewish people, that flaw is a flaw in his crown. Because Mesirut Nefesh, to give up one's life for God, obviously it comes from the super-rational level of the soul. So that's where the flaw is. I mean that this whole process of rectification that we're talking about now has to do with the rectification of a certain dimension, a certain aspect of the super-rational origin of Aharon's soul. That's why he was able to make a mistake, because it's not something that has to do with his conscious or rational levels of the soul. It's his crown. Things which have to do with your crown, this is something we learn for every one of us. Things which are nogea, which touch, relate to our super-rational level of the soul, it's very easy to go wrong, to make a mistake, because it's super-rational. So we have now two things that have to do with this crown. The flaw of the crown, which is to participate in the golden calf, which is idolatry, and not to give up one's life, to sacrifice himself. And then the epitome of love, we said, Ahava b'ta'anukim, love of delights, the highest level of love. What else has to do with the crown of Aharon? We just have one flaw. We'll leave the flaw of just one thing. All of the other things are very, very positive and good. It says that Aharon is that soul that reveals light, the light of God to the Jewish people, to all the souls of Israel, even to the whole world. How do we know that? That Aharon is a source of light. The source of light is also a level of the crown. The crown is called the ma'or, the origin or the source of light. And the light that shines out of it is already the conscious levels of the soul. But the superconscious, the source of Aharon, the source of. How do we see that? There's a verse in Psalms that reads, Ba'orcha nir'eh or, in your light, we shall see light. And that word, we shall see, which is the verb that takes your light into our eyes, so to speak, that we are able to envision your essential light. That word, nir'eh, we shall see, is a permutation of the name Aharon. So from this we learn that Aharon has the power to take out from your light. We'll say it in it's called in letters, in terminology of Kabbalah. Your light is the infinite light of God before the beginning of creation, which is referred to as before the initial contraction of the infinite light. That's called your light, the light as it is in you yourself. We shall see light is called the secret of the Kav in Kabbalah. The Kav is the line, the ray of light that penetrates into the vacuum that was created by the contraction, the initial contraction, in the terminology of Kabbalah. So once more, what is then the power of the soul of Aharon? To take hold, as it were, of the light before the contraction, which is called your light, and to bring it down into that ray of light which permeates the vacuum in which creation takes place, that all of the worlds and all of reality comes to existence. The first ray of light that enters into the realm or the domain, the vacuum is called the domain of reality as we know it, is the crown of reality. It's called the beginning of the Kav in the terminology of Kabbalah. The infinite light before the Tzimtzum is even above that. Can't even be called the crown of reality itself. So once more, that power to bring down from your light into the light that we can see, because it's in our domain, that is the power of the soul of Aharon. And that power to reveal light is what's coming from his crown, because it has to do with the crown of reality. That power to bring down light has to do with another more known thing about Aharon, that he has the power to bless the people. Birkat Kohanim. The blessing of the priests, and he is the high priest, and his blessing is the essence of blessing. The priests, when they bless the Jewish people, there's a blessing that is said before the blessing. And the blessing is that that we are commanded by God to bless the people with love. Another indication, very explicit, that the power to bless all comes because he is the essence of love. If you have love, you can bless, and your blessing is potent. Without love, the blessing has no potency to it whatsoever. So he has the power to bless, and it says that those blessings of Aharon are the highest blessings in the Torah, and they come from the crown, from the suprarational crown. In particular, they come from the Yesod, the power that a tzaddik, Aharon is a tzaddik, a righteous soul, a priest, and the power that a tzaddik has to bless someone, the blessing comes true. That's called Brachot lerosh tzaddik. That's the verse in the Proverbs. That blessings come to the head of the tzaddik. That's the yesod. And these blessings, the priestly blessings, come from the yesod of the. Each one of the sfirot is all inclusive of all of the sfirot. So in the crown also there's the yesod, the foundation of the crown. That's the power that Aharon has to bless, to draw down blessing. All of these things that we're now saying about the crown of Aharon, we're going to make a model of how they relate themselves to the different sfirot within the crown of Aharon. First, we'll complete with the one final thing about the crown of Aharon. There's something unique about Aharon that the sages say that he possesses something that no other soul in the world possessed, not Moses, no one. The verse reads also in Psalms 65, it says, Ashrei tivchar utikarev, the three words in Hebrew, which means happy is the one who you have chosen and who have brought near. Meaning that there are certain souls that God chooses. And there are certain souls that God brings near. And it says that there's only one soul in the world that is both chosen and brought near. And that's Aharon. It's an amazing thing. And this is all from verses explicit verses in the Bible. It says that Abraham was chosen, because there's a verse that reads that he is the chosen one of God. But there's no verse that reads that he was brought near to God, or that God brought him near to himself. So Abraham was chosen, but he wasn't brought near. So if he wasn't brought near, how did he come close to God? He came close to God by his own service. He himself brought himself close to God. It's not that God brought him, reached out to him, and brought him close. He waited. God wanted Abraham to bring himself close. He chose him, but he wanted him to arouse, it's called arousal from below, to bring himself close and near to God. So Abraham is the first example that he was chosen but not brought near. The second example is Jacob, the choice of the patriarchs of the fathers. Also, there's a verse that reads that he was chosen, but there's no verse that reads that he was brought near. Why? Because God wanted him to bring himself near and close. The third is Moses. Usually we think of Moses as the greatest figure in the whole Bible. But Moses also, it says that he was chosen, but he was not brought near. And the fourth is King David. That also it reads that he was chosen but not brought near. Four great, great souls, Abraham, Jacob, Moses, and David. And then it says there are other souls that are brought near but not chosen, the opposite. Who are those souls that are brought near and not chosen? The souls of righteous converts, or of true Baalei Tshuva in the Jewish people. The two examples that Chazal quote to one that is brought near but not chosen are Jethro, Yitro, Moses' father-in-law, who is the first righteous convert with the giving of the Torah. And actually, because of his conversion, the Torah was given. We needed him to convert in order for the Torah to be given to us. And the other example is not, I would think maybe it's a Ruth. The other example that Chazal say is a Rachav Azunah, who, according to Chazal, Joshua married her after they captured Jericho. And she was saved because she had saved previously the two spies that came to spy Jericho. So it says that she was brought near, that means we brought her near to us, but she was not chosen. Chosen means initially from birth to be chosen. So actually, what can we learn from it? We can already learn a very, very teaching that there are certain souls, that the soul of a convert, that we are responsible to bring them near. If we want a source in the Torah to what's called outreach to righteous potential converts, this is the source. Not to wait that they bring themselves near, but to outreach and bring them near. So once more, the two examples that Chazal give are Jethro and Rachav Azunah. But it says there's nobody that is both chosen and brought near except Aharon. There's a verse that reads that he is chosen by God to be the high priest. It means that actually from birth he was chosen. But it says in the Torah, bring him near, Hakrev, to Aharon Achicha, that Moses was commanded by God to bring him near. And that he wasn't ready to come to accept the task and the role of being the high priest. He had to be brought near. He had to go out and bring him by hand, take him by hand. So once more, he has this very special property, the one and only soul that is both chosen and brought near. And how does the verse read? The verse reads, Ashrei, happy is he Happy as he means that in a certain sense Aharon is the happiest soul in the world, because he's the only one that fulfills this verse. Happy is he who is chosen and brought near. So actually we've now said 5 different things about the crown. Now in this verse, Ashrei tivchanot karev, happiness, osher, existential happiness, it sounds very close to delight, as we said before. But that state of osher, there are different words for happiness. It's not the simple word for happiness, simcha. Simcha in Hebrew is a mother property. But osher, this word osher, is a crown property. It's the happiness of the super-rational crown. So the very word ashrei, that he is happy is he, because he is both chosen and brought near. The word ashrei pertains to his crown. The 2 words, the 2 different acts of being chosen and being brought near, they actually correspond to the next 2 sfirot. These 3 words, happy is the one who is chosen and brought near. To be chosen comes from wisdom. To be brought near comes from understanding. But the happiness of having both properties simultaneously, that happiness of having both together, that's an experience of the crown. All right, now let's try to put all of these different thoughts to give them a model. This is all Aaron's crown. The flaw that we said, that he should have given up his life, whether it would have helped to prevent the golden calf, likely it wouldn't have helped, because Hur gave up his life and it didn't help. But it would have helped to rectify the soul of Aharon. And according to the Arizal, that's what God wanted from him. Mesirut Nefesh, ad hasov, to be ready to give up one's life to the extreme, to the end, to die for God. That's the crown of the crown. The state of delights, it says explicitly that the delights, the love of delights in the crown are the wisdom and the understanding of the crown. It's called Sha'ashu'im Yom Yom, the delights of 2 days. This is a verse from Proverbs. Those 2 days are the wisdom and the understanding of the crown. What's the difference? The difference is whether you feel that you're conscious, even if we're talking about superconscious, but there's some sense of the delight. When I speak of delight, I think that I experience it in some way. There's some sense of that experience, or there's no sense whatsoever of that experience. In wisdom, there's not yet the sense of it exists, but without any sensation of its being, of my feeling it to exist. In understanding, those delights already become to be felt in my soul, to be experienced in the soul. Those are the 2 days of the delights. The fact that he is the line, or he takes the infinite light and brings it down into a ray of light that becomes visible to us after the initial contraction. That's the Vav, but the crown is the Kotzol Yud, the tip above the Yud, of the Yud Ke Vav Ke in the crown of Aharon. The love of delights is the 2 first letters, the Yud and the Hey, Chochmah and Binah. The fact that, or Chan Yireh Or, in your light, we envision light, that's already the Vav, the Tiferet, the Midot of the crown of Aharon. the final state of Ashrei, of how happy is he that is both chosen and brought near. That's the Malchut. That's his total sense of satisfaction, of holy satisfaction. And above that, in the Yesod, as we said before, is his power that he takes us from that, the ability to reveal light, is his power to bless the people. So this all, once more, all the crown of Aharon. Let's try to do the others. Each one of the others also has its own Yud Ki Vav Ki to it, but since we began late, so we'll have to try to say in short. We already said something about wisdom and understanding, that the being chosen comes from wisdom, and being brought near comes from understanding. Because being chosen is like a tzaddik mi'ikara, a person who is initially, even from birth, a tzaddik. To be chosen, to be brought near, is a Baal Tshuva, or a ger, a righteous convert. And the tzaddik mi'ikara, the tzaddik initially from birth, he comes, it says, from the right line, from Chokhmah. But the one that is brought near from afar comes from the origin of the left, which is Bina. And that triplet, Ashrei Tivchanot Karev, are the first three Sfirot in Aharon's soul. But there are other things that have to do with his wisdom. The very fact that he's called a high priest. The Arizal says that a priest, a regular priest, who is not a high priest, is in the Sfirah of Chesed, of loving kindness. All priests are loving kindness. But the high priest is the origin of the loving kindness in the right line of the Sfirot, which is wisdom. So the very fact that Aharon is the high priest, that places him in the Sfirah of wisdom. We said before, in wisdom itself, there are different levels of wisdom. We'll see what level of wisdom, but that is a wisdom property of Aharon, that he is the high priest. What else? It says in one source that Aharon merited to be chosen, to be brought near to be the high priest, because of two virtues that he had, two attributes that he had. Busha and Anava. It's a very important teaching. Aharon had shame, holy shame, and humility. Because he had these two properties, that's why he was chosen to be the high priest. What is the difference between these two properties? You know that Anava is a common attribute, because both he possesses Anava and also his brother, his younger brother, Moses, is actually the epitome. If we want to say who's the greatest Anava, it's probably Moses, more than Aharon. From where do we learn that Moses is Anava? Because of the phrase that he says, V'nachnu mapi. The Torah says explicitly that the man Moses is the most humble person on earth. But in his own expression, he says, we are what? But when he says we, he's referring to both brothers, both I and Aharon, my brother. He says twice, we are what? What means nothing. But there's a third verse that reads, V'Aharon, that Moses says, V'Aharon mahu, that Aharon himself is by himself. He's nothing. So both brothers have Anava. The Arizal says that Anava is not the same as selflessness altogether. To be in a state of selflessness that one is even not conscious of as being selfless is in wisdom. But Anava, there is a sense of self. Just that I'm humble. What does it mean to be humble? To be humble means that any gift that I have, I know that it's from God. I don't take credit for any virtue that I possess. And I even think that if someone else would have that virtue, we would probably utilize it better than me. That's the definition of anava. So that property of anava is actually in ima. But the property of busha, what is shame? Shame is something we have to try to understand. Shame usually, nowadays people think that shame is not such a positive property, it's negative. But there's wholly good shame. Shame is called, in Chazal, the level of shame, which is actually alluded to in the very first word of the Torah, which is Breshit in the beginning, which permutes to spell Yarei Boshet. It's called the fear of shame. And the fear of shame is the existential shame of existing. As though my very existence is a blemish on the absolute white pane of God's infinite light. Why am I here in the first place? But that shame makes a person, as it were, disappear. Because he's ashamed of being. That shame is on the face. It's a property of wisdom. It's true selflessness. That's more. Yarei Boshet is called bitul bimetziut in Chassidut. It's total, absolute selflessness. Because it's existential shame of one's very existence. So once more it says that Aharon was chosen because he had both busha. Busha is part of his wisdom. And he had anava, which is part of his understanding. We have two pairs that have to do with wisdom and understanding. One pair is what we said, chosen and brought near. The other pair is shame and humility. What else is there about Aharon that has to do with wisdom? There's a famous verse that reads, Kulam b'chokhmah asita. You have made everything with wisdom, refers to God. But the Zohar interprets these words to read, Kulam b'chokhmah itberiru, all clarifications. Clarification means that there's a mixture of good and evil together, and there's the power of the soul to identify the good and to extract the good from the evil, or sometimes it's the opposite, to throw out the bad from the good. It means a clarification process. And in order to see in a mixture, in a compound, what is the good and what is the bad, and to be able to distinguish and differentiate between the two, and to choose the good and to push away the bad, that comes from the wisdom of the soul. That's why it says that all clarifications, all berurim are with wisdom. In Kabbalah it says that the mixtures of good and bad, which is a result of a primordial world that's broke, that we will not discuss now. But there's a number, 288 sparks that fell into mundane reality and became mixed together with evil. And we on earth, our purpose is to clarify. Clarify means to extract. To clarify is to redeem. It's like redeeming a soul that's in prison, or redeeming the Jewish people from exile. These sparks are in exile, they're in prison, they have to be redeemed. How do we redeem them? We redeem them with wisdom. What does this have to do with Aharon? There's a story when Korach, who opposed both Moshe, but especially Aharon, he wanted to be the high priest in place of Aharon. So in the end, whoever remembers the story, the earth opened up its mouth and he was swallowed up into the earth. But then the Jewish people still were not convinced 100% that Aaron has been chosen. This is his chosen to prove, let's prove. God has to prove to the Jewish people that I have chosen Aharon. How does he prove it? He says that each one of the tribes, the leader of the tribe, the prince of the tribe, should take his staff. Each one had a staff. Should take his staff and they put them all together in the Holy of Holies in the tabernacle, and we'll see whose staff will blossom miraculously. Because they were just staffs; they were not part of the tree. So all of these staffs were put into the Holy of Holies, and the next day, miraculously, V'hinei parach matei Aharon levet Levi. That's the phrase in the Torah. And behold, the staff of Aaron blossomed. Now that word to blossom, parach, is a permutation of repach, which is the number of those fallen sparks in reality. There's another very important thing about the relation between wisdom and understanding, father and mother, in Kabbalah. That any miracle, anything which is supernatural, comes from wisdom. Nature, the natural order, begins with understanding. That's why mother is like we say, even in English, you say Mother Nature. Natural order originates in mother. But father is supernatural. So there's this supernatural miracle that came to prove that Aaron is the chosen one to become the high priest. That's clearly a wisdom, relates or reflects the wisdom of Aharon, which is the wisdom to clarify all of the sparks, which is this number, Repach. Aaron, as we said before, equals 256. 256 is, we said it's 16 squared, 4 to the 4th, 2 to the 8th, but it's also 8 times 32. 8 is 2 to the 3rd, 32 is 2 to the 5th. So 2 to the 3rd times 2 to the 5th equals 2 to the 8th. Why is it important that Aaron is 8 times 32, 8 times 11? 32 is two very important words. One is lev, heart, the other is kavod, honor, glory. About glory we'll speak about in a moment. But the fact that he is 8 times heart, lamed bet, is a very important phenomenon about him. What happens if I add one more heart? There's a verse that reads that the Choshen HaMishpat, of all of his clothings, perhaps the greatest, most significant of the clothings, that's where the Ruach, his Holy Spirit, which is called the Urim and the Tumim, was inserted into his breastplate over his heart. It says that it was to be placed al lev Aharon. There's an idiom in the Torah which is called the heart of Aharon. We don't find such an idiom by other people, the heart of Abraham or the heart of Isaac or the heart of Moses. But there's a very important idiom in the Torah which is called Lev Aharon, and that's where his breastplate is placed upon. And that's where his Ruach HaKodesh comes from, his Holy Spirit. So we said that he himself is 8 times heart. But if you add one more heart, then it becomes 9 times heart. So Lev Aharon is actually 9 times heart. How much does that equal? 256 and another 32. So it equals 288. This in Kabbalah is one of the secrets of this special number. Why God chose this. It's also a chosen number. In the end of the Parashah, the Torah that we heard yesterday, we speak of a chosen people. That God has chosen us as the chosen people. We know that Eretz Yisrael is the chosen land. There are many things which are chosen. This number is a very chosen number. Why did God have 288 sparks fall into mundane reality and become mixed together, good and evil? So one of the secrets is that this number is 9 hearts. And 9 hearts is Lev is the heart of Aharon. In the heart of Aharon there's an eye called Ein HaSeichel Shebalev, the eye of intelligence, the eye of wisdom in the heart. There's a verse that reads, "My heart has seen much wisdom." And that eye of wisdom in the heart, that's his power to see the sparks, where the fallen spark is, and to be able to extract and redeem the fallen spark from reality. So once more, this property, which first of all is like a miracle that happened, that his staff blossomed. That miracle is a sign of being chosen, which comes from wisdom, from the Father property. And he then has this ability to redeem fallen sparks. Another thing about his wisdom, the wisdom of Aharon. Before we said that there was a flaw in his crown, that he should have given up his life. And he didn't. The Arizal says that sometimes one sin gives rise to another sin. Or one flaw, one blemish gives rise to another blemish. Because of this sin that he didn't give up his life, and he actually took part of the sin itself. So another thing happened. He was to be punished by all of his sons dying in his lifetime. But Moses prayed for him, and his prayer helped to save his 2 younger sons that did not die in his lifetime. But it did not help, Moses' prayer did not help to save the 2 older sons, which are Nadav and Abihu. And the reason for that is a very simple reason that also the Arizal explains, is because they also had a sin. That the 2 older brothers brought in a foreign fire into the tabernacle, which they were not commanded to bring. So they had a flaw, but their flaw by itself would not have made them liable to death. But because Aaron had sinned in his sin, and his punishment was to be that his sons will die in his lifetime. So that added together to their sin, and that's why the 2 of them passed away, died. But the 2 younger brothers that didn't do anything wrong, so for them, the prayer of Moses was sufficient to keep them alive, to help them. So the Arizal says a very amazing thing. He says that Aharon is not only because of his sin, his initial sin, his 2 sons died, but he is held responsible as though he, in a certain sense, this is very hard to say, in a certain sense he was responsible for the death of his 2 sons. As though he killed his 2 sons, his 2 older sons. Which is a blemish, the Arizal says, in fatherhood. If a person's children, chas v'sholom, pass away in his life, then there's some problem in the father. So the Arizal says that the fact that his 2 sons passed away in his lifetime, because of him and because of them, together, because of both, But that itself has to be rectified. That he was, in a certain way, responsible, not just for he should have given up his own life, but he was responsible for the death of his two sons, which were very, very great souls. In order to rectify these two sins, he had to come back in two reincarnations of two different people, both of whose names are the same. The name is Uriah. The first is Uriah Hitti, the husband of Bathsheba, who became afterwards the wife of King David. And he was killed in war by the command of David, which was a sin of David. But it was a rectification for him because he was a reincarnation of Aaron, and his death atoned for the fatherhood sin, that he was responsible for the death of his two sons. But then he came back as another person by the name of Uriah, who was a priest in the time, in the generation of the destruction of the first temple. And he prophesied, just like Jeremiah, that the temple is going to be destroyed, and Sion Sadet Techaresh, that Mount Zion will be plowed like a field. And because of that very, very harsh prophecy, so the people came and killed him by the command of the king Yehoiakim. And when he was killed, that was an atonement for Aharon not giving up his life. Again, these are very amazing things. That people are killed in order to atone for some previous reincarnation of someone who was... all of these souls are very, very great souls. It's all reincarnations of Aaron, the high priest. And so actually what we've said, we have to now conclude, and we didn't even do yet the Binah and the Dat. Mirza Hashem, whoever will get it written, so we'll try to include all of the material that we haven't been able to cover this evening. But first we have to now make order of those different wisdom properties, and then we'll see that there are also a whole order, a whole model of understanding properties of Aharon. We'll just conclude that there's one basic attribute of Dat, the Dat of Aharon. The Dat of Aharon is one of the most famous things about Aharon, that he has a power to make peace between people. He was the only soul that when he passed away, the whole Jewish people, both men and women, cried and mourned for. Why? Because he made peace between man and friend, and he made peace between husband and wife. That Aharon is the archetypal marriage counselor. Why can only he be a marriage counselor? Because if you want to go to a marriage counselor, I hope that nobody needs one, but if anybody does want one, so you have to try to find somebody like Aharon. Because not only is he the ideal marriage counselor, but he is also the ideal matchmaker. We're already now in Chamishas Harbab, which is the day of making matches. One verse in the prophet that relates to Aharon is Siftei Kohen Yishmeu Dat v'Torah Yivakshum Mipiu, the lips of the priest, which is a verse that's referring to Aaron. Yishmeru Dat, keep, guard, Dat. We're not talking about his Dat property. V'Torah Yivakshum Mipiu, one should ask Torah to be spoken from his mouth. The initial letters of the first 5 words of that verse, Siftei Kohen Yishmeu Dat v'Torah, spell Shidduch. This is a chidush of Rabbi Nachman of Breslov that he says in the Likutei Moharan, that the power to make Shidduchim comes from Aharon. The Torah doesn't actually say that he makes Shidduchim, that he makes matches. It just says that he makes Shlom Bayit. that he's a marriage counselor after you're married. But probably he's such a good marriage counselor because he made the shidduch in the first place, so he takes responsibility, full responsibility. But even so, he wouldn't be successful if he didn't have some very, very deep ability in his soul to connect other souls. He's Ohev Shalom. It's all because of his love. But this is his love at the level of dat. Dat is connection, hitkashrut. Moshe Rabbeinu is dat, Aharon is dat, and also the leader after Yehoshua, who comes after Moshe, is also. This now will conclude. A very important thing about dat. Dat is the power to connect. The dat that Moses is referred to as the all-inclusive dat of the Jewish people is that he implants, or he is present in every one of us as the power of us to connect to God. Once more, the fact that every person has the ability to connect is like to marry. To connect and even to marry God, that comes from Moses. But the property of souls to connect to one another, that comes from Aharon. The property of the leader to connect, of the shepherd to connect to his flock, is the dat of Yehoshua, of Joshua, as it says, that Joshua knows how to relate and to establish a rapport with each and every soul. It's the special dat which is necessary to connect the leader to each one of his people. It's not to connect the people one to the other. So once more, this is a very important idea. That there has to be a power to connect oneself to God. There has to be the power to connect souls together. There has to be the power to connect the leader to the people. But just know what each one needs, and to be able to talk with each and every one in his language. In his language means relate a rapport with him. But to connect two other souls together, especially to make a match between the bride and groom, that comes from Aharon. So with this we'll conclude this evening, and maybe there are questions.
Thank you very much, Rav Ginsburgh. Before we take questions, I just want to show everyone again. This is called Mechol HaKramim. The subtitle is Bein Chamisha Asar B'Av Yom HaKippurim Al Shiduchim Brit Tshuva V'Geula. For those who came in late, this is an entire book about Tu B'Av, and it comes very highly recommended. I believe that we have some on the table here. And of course it could be. This is the dance in the vineyards. The dance of the vineyards.
No, I'd say to translate the book into English.
Oh, okay. Shah Tova. But before we take questions from Chutz La'aretz in here, I take the prerogative that I'd like you to comment. You were talking about the shame of Aharon, and you defined shame as the existential feeling of somehow my existence is a blemish in the bigger order. So I don't know about what anyone else, but what popped into my mind is to ask if you could comment how you can compare that, or really the opposite, distance that from the Christian dogma called first sin, initial sin. How would you explain the difference between the two?
It's obvious it's totally different one from the other. That the feeling as a stereotype of sin is a total sense of self-consciousness. If the person is, if you're bound to some initial sin, means that you yourself are defined as a sin. You might be ashamed of it, but you're not going away. That sense of being the sin, so to speak, buries you in the feeling of sin. And that's the opposite of the Torah, because the Torah is consciousness can be rectified, and it must be rectified. But this very high level, which has no relation whatsoever to any Goyish doctrine, is becoming totally selfless, which means it's the very opposite of consciousness. It's more that Goyish idea of being bound to sin, one cannot escape sin, is the very opposite of Yiddishkeit.
I thought you would say that, but I just wanted to hear it. Here we have a question from Avraham in Los Angeles. By what mechanism does a bracha transfer through one person to another? And how is Birchat HaKohanim from a Kohen different from a regular blessing from a tzaddik?
Right, so we'll begin with the end. If a tzaddik is a true tzaddik and that he loves the Jewish people, so he definitely has a very great power, just like the Kohen to bless the people. He's not commanded in the Torah to say the explicit blessing of the 15 words of Birkat Kohanim, but he definitely has the power. Why does he have the power? Because he loves. Once more, the way that it works is that love is it's like even now in the physics, there are different powers of creation. There's electromagnetism, there's gravity, the strong force, different forces, the weak force. According to modern physics, each force is transmitted with a particle. They're still looking for the graviton, which is the particle which transmits gravity. But electromagnetism is the simplest of all. The particle is called the photon. It's massless. If a person has love, he has a lot of photons that he can shoot out of himself into reality. And that's, each one is full of potent blessing. It's taking just obviously a parable from science. But once more, if you have love, you're full of spiritual electromagnetic power to project into reality photons of blessing.
Okay, from Moshe from San Francisco. How does the Aharon Brit, the Ark of the Covenant containing the manna, the staff of Aharon, and the tablets, does it have to be found before the Beit HaMikdash can be built?
Right, they're together. It doesn't. The Aharon Brit does not contain the staff. The staff is on the side. It's not in the Aharon Brit. But in the second temple, the Aharon Brit was not present. It was still buried beneath the mountain, the Harabayit, the place of the temple. So obviously when Mashiach comes, he will rebuild the Aharon. And I imagine that it will also reveal the other things. There was the Tinsenet Haman of the manna and the staff of Aharon, also there in the Kodesh HaKodeshim. So I certainly am waiting and hoping that they reappear soon with the coming of Mashiach.
This is from Yisrael, somewhere in California. is a name, because you mentioned about the lathe Aharon and the breastplate. So his question is the name of the Urim V'Tumim that is in the breastplate the same as the 42-letter name of the acronym of the Ana B'Koach prayer, or is it a different name?
It doesn't say explicitly what the name is, but it could definitely relate to the 42-letter name. If you already mentioned the 42-letter name, we'll say something about one of the things we didn't get to. The full line in the scriptures, meaning in the Tanakh, of all of there are actually 10 stages in the reincarnation of Aharon. I'll just say them in short. It's first Adam, then Hevel, then Haran. Those three are before Aharon, and they correspond to the first three Sfirot in this lineage, this spiritual lineage of reincarnation. Then comes Aharon as the fourth. Then comes the judge Ya'abet, who is Othniel, the first judge of the Jewish people after Joshua. That's the next reincarnation. So each reincarnation rectifies a certain aspect that, again, we don't have now the time to go through. After Ya'abetz comes Tola ben Pua, another judge from the tribe of Yisachar. His name Tola means a worm. It has to do with the 42-letter name, because the 42-letter name is actually an array of 7 different 6-letter names. And the first of those 6-letter names equals Tola. This particular judge. We already see that Aharon has to do with this 42-letter name. After Tola ben Pu'ah, then comes Shmuel Aramati, Samuel, again one of the greatest souls of Israel. He also is a reincarnation of the same line. Then comes Uriah Hitti, the first Uriah, who was initially married to Bathsheba. Then comes Uriah HaKohen, the second one. And these two Uriahs were both killed, as we said before. Then finally comes Zechariah, the prophet Zechariah, who is a prophet of consolation, of the building of the second temple, and even already speaks of the third temple of Mashiach. He is the Malchut, he's the final one. There are many, many secrets of this whole 10 levels of Aharon, but if you count the number of letters in all of those 10 names, there are exactly 42 letters. So it says that there's something about the whole line of Aharon and his incarnations, which is the secret of the 42-letter name, and the whole, altogether, it's all of these souls are all Aaron souls. It's all Aharon. So definitely, there's a very strong affinity to the 42-letter name, and very likely it also appears in the Urim V'Tumim.
While you're at it, could you comment on the fact that in Hebrew, the ark, Ha'aron, are the same letters as Aharon?
Right. If it's spelled chaser k'tiv, in other words, Aharon by itself, it can either be with a vav or without a vav. In the regular Hebrew, it's with a vav, and then it would be one letter more. But often in the Torah, it's spelled without a vav, and then, as you say, if there's an additional hey at the beginning, the ark, then it's Aharon. And it also says that it's a permutation of what we said before, nir'eh, because the source of light is in the ark. It's the tablets of the covenant. That's where the light is coming from. So Ha'aron permutes to nir'eh, and nir'eh is once more a permutation of Aharon. And the simple explanation is the only person that can go there, who was able to enter the Holy of Holies, to the place of the ark. Only Aharon, once a year. Just that it says when Mashiach will come, there will be revealed in each of our souls a spark of Aharon. This the Rebbe says all the time. That in each soul, Aharon will become revealed, and then every single Jew will be able to enter, not just once a year, every day, will be able to enter the Holy of Holies, and then to embrace the Aharon Abrit and the idiom of the Rebbe, to dance together with the divine Shekhinah, God's presence in the Holy of Holies.
Okay, this is the big question of the night. This is from Dina, and I'm going to add to her question just a little bit. I'm reading it exactly how it is, okay? It says, how come Chabad girls do not come and dance in the fields of Jerusalem so that the men can choose the shidduch from amongst them, like in the old days? And because you do mention it in this book. You do mention that the way we do Tu B'Av today is not exactly how it's mentioned in the Mishnah. But a very good question, this is a very good question, is if this doesn't go today in the religious world, so how should we celebrate Tu B'Av?
Okay, we celebrate Tu B'Av by asking Aharon to make shidduchim. We're open and ready for shidduchim. It's a day to be open to shidduchim. Not all girls and boys are open, but this is the day. So this day has a mazel to make good shidduchim. The fact that the girls, first of all, I don't know why the question was Chabad girls, because I don't know other girls that that go out to dance in the vineyards. But apparently the one that asked the question said that everyone will take the example of Chabad girls. So it's all up to them to set the example. The reason it says explicitly that it's a sign of exile. Because this custom has to do with the redemption, with the Beis HaMikdash is standing. And then it all begins with the daughter of the king. In the Mishnah, the Gemara, the daughter of the king, and the daughter of the high priest. All of the daughters, beginning with the princess herself and with the daughter of the high priest, they all lend white, simple clothing one to the other, and they all go out together. So apparently, you have to, in order for this meaning, this custom to take place, you have to have a king and a daughter. You have to have a high priest and a daughter. And unfortunately, we don't have that right now, but there are many things. Let's say one more thing that we didn't say about wisdom and the fact that he's the high priest. What is the difference? We said that according to the Arizal, a regular priest is chesed, and the high priest is chokhmah. What is the difference in halacha? Is there a law that differentiates in the life, in the marital life of a high priest versus a regular priest? So there is a very important verse that is explicit in the Torah. It says that a high priest must marry a virgin, which is not the case of a regular priest. A regular priest cannot marry a divorcee. A regular Jew, any Jew, can marry both a divorcee or a widow. A regular priest already has a limitation that he can't marry a divorcee. He can't marry a widow. But a high priest has a more that he can't marry neither any girl, just a virgin. What is the deep secret of that? The deep secret is that the high priest, who is wisdom, the level of wisdom, his marriage is to what's called the highest level of Bina, which is a feminine level that even when married and with children, with many children, remains spiritually a virgin. It's a very, very deep teaching in Hasidut. The fact that the high priest marries a virgin means that he has an affinity to relate And to, just as we said before, he's a marriage counselor. There's a power that Aharon has that if any girl, a woman, had any trauma in her life, was ever chas v'shalom molested in any way in her life, the counselor that can bring the girl or her back to a state of virginity is Aharon. Means that his wife always remains a virgin after she's married to him and after she has children. She's all the time. What does virginity mean? Virginity is a state of, we used the word before, existential, the state of existential innocence. Are only girls virgins and not boys? No. It says in the Torah that boys are also virgins. In the time of the temple, which is the time when this minhag existed, so it says that the boys also were all virgins. What does it mean they were all virgins? That they all, even at grown-up boys, usually the boy is older than the girl, they all had total innocence. They were holy young men. Many of them we read on Tisha B'Av. Many of the lamentations that we read on Tisha B'Av were of the holy virgin boys and girls being killed by the Romans. But the Torah and the liturgy describes both boys and girls as pure innocence. That once more, this is a remedy for all psychological maladies today, which usually have to do with different problems in growing up in youth. And that soul was able to bring us back to that primal innocence of virginity is the high priest. So this maybe is one of the greatest things about the soul of Aharon. That's why when he passed away, he was cried after by both the men and the women, the boys and the girls, because he was the source of the virginity of the Jewish people, the eternal virginity.
Okay, one more question from outside of Israel, from Aharon in Minneapolis. You indicated that while Moshe connects souls to Hashem, Aharon connects souls to each other. How does Aharon do that?
Well, he does that by projecting his love. He's able to project his love to two people and to bring them together. This also has its parallel in physics. There's some power that he's able to project that relates, that connects to the two, but not to the two as distinct, the two as coming together. This is called Avodat HaYikudim. Before we said that he has to do with Avodat HaBeirurim, that he makes clarifications of the 288 sparks. But it says when that service of Beirurim has been completed, and the Rebbe has said that we're already at the second stage, then comes the real service of Aharon, after he has clarified, to make unifications. Much more. The power of unification comes from Dat, because the inner dimension of Dat is called Yichud, unification. I just wanted to be able to project the two people. We'll just say what the Chazal say. He used to go to what two people were quarreling with one another. So he went to one and he said, it seems as he said a lie, but he didn't say a lie. He said the truth as it is in the source. He says that your friend wants to make up with you. And the same thing he said to the other person. He said, your friend loves you. And the other person he also said he loves. And then when they met on the street, they embraced one another in love, and they came together. So once more, he was able to arouse in each one from his source, even though he is quarreling with another person, that really he loves him. his love was so great that he was able to reveal the love of each one for the other. That's something very, very special. It's not just being able to relate, as we said before, be able to relate to you as you are, and to connect with you as you are. That's Yoshua. It's able to project to each one how you love someone else. And we all love one another, and call yourself Chaverim.
Okay, I believe we have time for some questions from people here. If anyone would like to ask a question, now is the time. Yes?
You mentioned before the Untitled just a more nicer question. If you're in the cloud, look for the Untitled, is man is that? Try to find it.
Okay, the question is, before we had a question about, do we have to find the Aharon Kodesh before Mashiach comes and we build the temple? So the question here was asked, do we have an obligation to look for the Aharon Kodesh in our day?
Again, everything about the building of the temple, the Rambam paskins that the Mashiach will build the temple. So all of these questions are questions for him. So just let's wait. He will know exactly what to do and what we have to do, and he'll find the Aharon HaKodesh, and we can rely on him that he'll do it the best way. We just have to pray that he comes.
That's our obligation.
That's our
Our obligation is to pray for Mashiach to come. Right. Any other questions? Either side?
Regarding what the Rav said about that Hashem expected Aharon to devote his life to the sin of the Golden Calves. My question is, can't we consider that what we know from Masechet Sanhedrin, that Aharon, because he saw that Hur was killed, he imagined that if Am Yisrael would kill him as well, then they won't have a way to repent. So can't we consider that Aharon preferred to do the sin of the Golden Calf with them, to participate with them, and then to allow them, because he understood that if you kill him, they won't have a way to repent. So he decided that to give his, he decided even consciously that he would be punished, and they will have the possibility to repent. Can't we consider that as a devotion? Because he was ready to be punished himself instead of them. Isn't it also a devotion?
Okay, the question is, the Rav mentioned in the name of the Arizal that it was considered a flaw that Aharon wasn't willing to give up his life like Hur to try to stop the building of the Golden Calf. So the question is, could it be considered even a better solution or a higher level that by not giving up his life and somehow participating in the Golden Calf, even though he did try to stop it, that this would give the people a chance to do tshuva. It would give them a chance to fix what they had done, which if they would have killed him, it would have been much more difficult. So that's the question.
The Chazal themselves say that he thought, this all thought process, that he thought that if they'll kill him, their sin of killing him will be so great that there will be no atonement for it. This Chazal, the sages say, it's not from Kabbalah, that the reason he didn't give up his life is he thought that they've already killed one leader. If they'll kill me, so their sin of killing me will be more severe even than the sin of the Golden Calf itself. And there will be no atonement for the people. For in his love for the people, he didn't give up his life. So I would never know if he is right or wrong. That's why I have to rely on the Arizal, that he says that he made a mistake. And the mistake is because it's coming from such a high level of the super-rational crown. Once more, in rationale, he had a lot of rationale not to give up his life. He not only has rationale, he even has a level of Ruach HaKodesh. And even with that, altogether, you can still make a mistake. But again, we would never know that without the Arizal.
I just want to say it's like what you said, that a blemish for someone at such a high level as Aharon Cohen, for someone else, it might not be thought of a blemish at all. But this was on such a high level that there was a certain level of responsibility. Okay, so here is, you ready for this one? This is from this is from Jacob of Santa Monica. He said, as far as the marriage counselor goes, will any Kohen do? Or just a Kohen Gadol? Especially today before the temple is built, because I need a marriage counselor now.
So you have to look for someone like Aharon Kohen, like the Kohen Gadol, not just any Kohen. But any Kohen means anybody who thinks that he's a marriage counselor. You have to look for someone who is like Aharon Kohen HaGadol. So it's not always easy to find, but it says since Hashem, God wants you to have a happy marriage, that's for sure. So He must provide you with a good counselor. Because God is responsible. That if you need a counselor, there must be a good counselor that's like Aharon Kohen Gadol. You have to make your effort to find, not to suffice with just anybody. What's more, a Kohen is not necessarily the lineage of the Kohen now, in our day. In the time of the Torah, there's something else about all Kohanim, not just Aharon. They were the doctors, the physical doctors. In that respect, as being a doctor, there wasn't anything special about the high priest. All priests were doctors. But now that we know that there are other doctors that are not the high priests, not priests at all. Even doctors not Jewish. The Rebbe said you have to look for the best doctor, even if he's not Jewish. Go to the best doctor. So obviously, for something spiritual, he has to have faith. So you can't go to a counselor that's not Jewish, that doesn't have faith. But you have to look for the one who has this level of Kohen Gadol to him. What's more, Kohen Gadol, which means high priest, in Hebrew the word Gadol means big, great. It's exactly the opposite. It's not one that feels himself great. You have to look for a counselor who feels himself nothing. That's the busha, the level of shame. And what's more, first of all, I bless that you have your shlom bayit, a happy marriage, just with inspiration from on high. The high priest is also, God is called the high priest. So you can also use him ask him to be your marriage counselor. He's on high. The light should come from on high, and the blessing should come from on high, and the insight. What is a marriage counselor? He gives you insight. Insight is also wisdom. How to correct whatever problem there is in the marriage. So you should be blessed with a lot of insight, especially today, coming from the soul of Aharon. If you need another soul to help you, you'll find that you should find a real high priest to help you.
Somebody finds themselves in a circle of colleagues which he loves, and he finds that they're doing something which is 100% against his values and 100% against Torah or values, secular term, and but on the same token, he's 100% sure he will alienate them by speaking out. How do you advise them to proceed?
Okay, the question is if someone is in a work or social situation with colleagues that they like very much, yet there's something being done morally or ethically wrong, how does one go about letting them know this without breaking the bond of friendship or love between them?
Okay, so first of all, there's a whole section in the Shulchan Aruch about the laws of tochacha, of how to it's called constructive criticism of other people. It's a mitzvah in the Torah. This is a very sensitive mitzvah, as you say. It's the most sensitive of all mitzvot. It says, Rabbi Akiva already said, in our generation, I don't know if anybody is worthy to chastise, to criticize another person. Because in order to criticize somebody else, you have to be correct yourself. And who is so correct in himself that he's able to criticize somebody else? On the other hand, there still is a mitzvah in the Torah, how to do it correctly, how to speak with him, like it says, in private, not in public, to explain to him, to project to him that I'm doing it out because I love you. This is, you have to learn. You have to learn the halakha, and you have to learn in your soul how to do it properly. It's very hard, this mitzvah of tochacha. But if you serve, you said in the context, the situation of a work situation, say of colleagues. So number one, you have to know that if you're in a company that's doing wrong things and producing wrong products, so you have to quit. That's number one. But if you're part of the line of something bad being produced, so it's not for you. That's your own. That's chastising yourself. Don't participate in something which is bad. If you can help prevent it, so you have to try. There's an expression that the Rebbe always used to use, that everything that you say has to be ba'ofen hamitkabel, in a way that the ear of the other person will be able to hear it. If you can't say it, if you think right now that I cannot say it in a way that his ear will be receptive, then better not to say it. It's also in Pirkei Avot it says, don't say something which you know will not be heard. But again, this all goes back to explicit laws, halachot, in the Shulchan Aruch, how to properly perform this mitzvah. The Baal Shem Tov said, the verse reads, rebuke, you shall rebuke your friend. First of all, he has to be your friend. Second of all, why does it say twice? Says the Baal Shem Tov, first you have to rebuke yourself. You have to know that any bad thing that you see in somebody else, you have it in yourself. It's a reflection of yourself. First, rectify that very same thing in yourself. Then you'll be able to lovingly help the other person also get over it. But as we said before, if it's something that you're part of some evil occupation, even though you don't want it, but if you're part of it, you have to quit, to get out of it. And you have to explain to the people that you're leaving because something wrong is being done.
I believe we have time for one more question. There was a question over here. Yes.
How do you recommend any of us knowing exactly what our tikkun is? Because it can be very confusing. We try to, work on our ego, get our relationship with other people, and Torah mitzvahs we're trying to learn. How can we really clarify that we're doing the right work and we're not making mistakes with interpreting? What are the best ways?
Okay, the question is, the Rav spoke tonight about tikkun, rectification, and clarification. So the question is, how does a person know what their tikkun is? And how do they know that they're interpreting the signs in their life to know what their tikkun is and how to go about it?
All right, so even if we now learn this evening that even Aharon the high priest, who was one of the greatest of all souls, was able to make a mistake in his rationale of what to do. So obviously we're all able to make mistakes. And even Moshe Rabbeinu, when he became angry, he made a mistake. So the first thing that we learn from Chazal is if you want to not make mistakes, never become angry. We didn't talk about that, but that's the first simple thing. That if you get angry, even Moses makes a mistake. So never get angry. To get angry is like Avodah Zarah. That itself is the golden calf. It could be that Aaron can have great love for the people. The rationale, as we said before, that he had not to be killed was because he thought that to be killed would be bad for the people. But it could be that in he's supposed to be 100% love of the people. I don't remember if it says so, but according to this rule that what brings one to a mistake is anger, it could be that when you see it was like the question that was just asked before, when you see people that you love making a bad mistake, so maybe you'll become a little bit angry at them, even Aharon. And as soon as you become angry, then you make a mistake as though you're doing it for them, out of love for them. And that itself becomes a mistake. So once more, the only thing that we can say, you need two things. You need a Rebbe. The reason that Aharon made a mistake is because his Rebbe was not there. It was Moshe Rabbeinu. So you need a Rebbe, and the Rebbe has to be there to consult with. And don't get angry, because even your Rebbe, if he gets angry, makes a mistake. So you need a Rebbe, and never get angry at people.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi Ginsburgh. Thank you, everyone who tuned in around the world. Thank you, everyone who came here in Yerushalayim, Kodesh.
When's the next
Please,
the next class? When is it?
please mark your calendars. The first Sunday in September. Someone help me out quickly. What's the date? Oh, okay. For those who are here, very important. The class will not take place here. We're back at Mayanot for just one class in Nachlaot. I don't know the address, but it's at Mayanot. The date in September is September 3rd, and the Hebrew date is Beis Elul. Yud Beis Elul. Next class, and as we said in the beginning, starting right now here, at least in Israel, we could already start saying L'Shana Tova, Ketiva v'Chatima Tova. We're on our way to Rosh Hashanah, a new year. It should be full of blessings for everyone. Ketiva v'Chatima Tova.
Ketiva v'Chatima Tova, L'Shana Tova U'Mtuka.